What if I told you that Columbus wasn't the great explorer you thought he was? What if I told you that he was actually a cruel and violent man who committed terrible atrocities against the indigenous people he encountered? In this video, I'm going to debunk the myth of Christopher Columbus and reveal the truth about his cruelties, and we're going to look at the evidence of his crimes against humanity. But who is this man called Columbus, and what made him different from every other explorer? Columbus was an Italian explorer and navigator who was born on August 25, 1451. He grew up in a place known as the Republic of Genoa. In his lifetime, he completed about 4 Spanish-based voyages across the Atlantic Ocean, with his voyages mostly sponsored by Catholic monarchs. Because of his explorations in Spanish territories, there was a widespread European exploration and colonization of the Americas. But how come he is said to be the father of slavery himself? You see, before the emergence of Christopher Columbus in the New Age, slavery already existed. Before the year 1492, the Native Americans already enslaved tribes that they conquered in war. However, the arrival of Columbus made it a horrible nationwide trade. This started when the Spanish crown provided funding for Columbus's expedition. His expedition's goals were to find a new trade route to the east and bring back wealth, and as such, Columbus was particularly interested in gold and silver. Historically, slavery was originally introduced on Columbus's first journey in 1492 when he began to view the natives as prospective servants, since he realized how submissive they were. At first, all he wanted to do was bring back a few indigenous people for King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to see, so he gave his troops orders to kidnap 7 women and 3 children on one island so they could carry them back to Spain. But by the time Columbus arrived in Cuba, he'd already started to imagine sprawling towns where the Spaniards would rule over indigenous laborers. He claimed that the Native Americans were suitable to be ordered about and made to work, to sow, and to do all that may be necessary. In one of his voyages, while going through the Caribbean islands and part of the Central and South American coast, Columbus encountered the indigenous people of India. Columbus himself was the one who called them Indians. He captured the Indians and enslaved them, and not only did he make them work for him, he also treated them with great cruelty. You see, he did this by establishing a system of tribute. Every 3 months, these hard-working Indians had to provide him with a certain amount of gold. On other islands, it was challenging to find enough gold, and so those who failed to do so had their hands viciously cut off. Eventually, slavery was instituted on the islands to replace the short-lived tribute system. Columbus implemented crazy policies of forced labor during his time in the New World, putting Indians to work for the mundane purpose of profits. Later, Columbus carried from Hispaniola thousands of Comtano Indians to Spain for sale, and many perished while traveling. Those who were left behind were made to labor on plantations and gold panning in the mines. Columbus led the way for so many other explorers to begin what was called the slave trade in the Atlantic regions. The Atlantic slave trade covered about 3 different continents: North America, South America, and Africa, enslaving about 10 million Africans that were taken to America. Needless to say, this horrible event caused years of immense suffering in African countries. They began to ship natives from different parts of North America to both Europe and the Caribbean. Unfortunately, many died in the process due to diseases and murder. These traders didn't show any mercy to the supposed slaves. For example, in the deck of slave ships there were different sections, one for the men and the other side for the women. The male captives were chained while the females were left unchained but undoubtedly imprisoned. Hundreds of people were crammed close together in horrible conditions with poor ventilation and sanitary facilities. Africans held as slaves experienced abuse from the captain and crew, while diseases like dysentery and smallpox, depression and open despair, and sexual exploitation became the daily portion of these destitute souls. As a result, in the early years of the slave trade, the average mortality rate for captive Africans was over 20%, and by 1800 it was only about 10%. Even though this is not something this generation is familiar with, we certainly still see its effects all around us, even to this day. Reports show that before Columbus came to Hispaniola Island, the population was about 8 million people. But after he brutally killed them, coupled with outbreaks of some diseases, they were now reduced to about 12,000. And in 1542, only 200 people of those 12,000 remained alive. For the indigenous people, slavery or diseases were not the only causes of death. Some either died of hardship or eventually ended up committing suicide. Reports also show that a disease known as Black Death is thought to have killed 25 million people throughout medieval Europe. This disease was more severe than the outbreak between 1347 and 1352. It's impossible to pinpoint the specific location and timing of the emergence of some diseases because medical records were either scarce or non-existent in those days. However, some of the disease could be traced to smallpox, measles, diphtheria, and many others. And so, the Angel of Death seemed to be an undeclared passenger as Columbus traveled with his slaves. So why then do we celebrate Columbus Day today? Columbus Day celebration has been a celebration in the United States since 1971, formerly every October 12th. This celebration was used to commemorate Columbus's landing on October 12th, 1492 in the New World. Even though the landing is commemorated on October 12th in the United States, the name differs elsewhere. It was referred to as Day of the Race or Dia de la Raza in various nations in Latin America until Mexico changed the name to Day of the Pluricultural Nation. Meanwhile, the event is known as the Day of Hispanicity or Dia de la Hispanicidad. In Spain, it also serves as Spain's national day or Fiesta Nacional de España. So, as for some countries, this seems to be a festive day. How about the African countries that were plundered by Columbus? For this reason, some American states changed the name from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And rightly so. Let's take a look at which tribes were affected most by his authority. Number 1. Nigeria. The Yoruba people were taken to countries like Brazil, Cuba, and Trinidad. The Igbo people were also captured and taken to Barbados and Jamaica before they were finally shipped to North America. Number 2. Ghana. Known as the Akan tribe, these people were carried to Brazil, Jamaica, and other surrounding countries. Some also ended up in America. Number 3. Congo. These people were also taken to Brazil and Cuba. Number 4. Senegal, Guinea, and Mali. The Mandinka were captured and taken to Brazil and the United States. Based on everything we've talked about so far today, we can easily conclude that Christopher Columbus did a lot more harm than good in his voyages. Yes, he was an explorer, yet he became a New World slave trader that ruined the lives of many black families and destroyed cultures. So, instead of celebrating him as a hero, shouldn't we spread the real story of what happened? I hope that you were able to get some historical insights from this video. If you've got other perceptions, please drop them in the comments section down below. And don't forget to subscribe to see more interesting videos from us. And as always, everybody, thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. We'll see you in our next video.